Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Talking Deen podcast. I'm your host Majid, and I have with me Brother Rash, the one and only. We have Mr. Sira, Talking Sira specialist, Brother JK. And also we have Brother Khairul with us today. He's our resident artist, the one who designs all our posters and all the graphics work. And, we get many compliments for the work, but people don't see who does the work. And, here today we dragged Brother Khairul on just to give him some exposure and put a face to the name. Brothers, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
I do feel a bit overwhelmed here, because our viewers and listeners probably don't know, but Rash, JK, and Khairul, and also Brother Kam from the last show, they are brothers, blood brothers, the Kashems.
Brothers.
Alhamdulillah, the brothers, it's like a household of da'is and dawah carriers and politicians. Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless this family. But yeah, so I feel a bit overwhelmed here. I'm outnumbered 3-1.
It's okay, Maj. In Islam, there's no such thing as brotherhood, just in the family. So everyone's our brother. You're our brother as well. So welcome to the family.
Welcome to the family. Easy, sound like a mafia, bro. But
We'll change your second name. We'll change your second name.
We're not going to gang up on you, bro.
Yeah, but the only
good
thing is I'm asking the questions, innit? So if it was the other way around, I probably would be outnumbered in that respect. But okay, guys, so time's going quick. Ramadan's flying. 10 days have gone, and I think we're on the 13th day now, and it's crazy. I've not known any time of the year to go as quick as this month of Ramadan, and this is the same thing we say every year anyway. But just to get an insight on how things are going and how you guys have been spending these blessed days. I'll start with Brother Rash. Bro, what's happening?
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, you're right. It's going fast. And I know we say it every single year. I've been trying to put my finger on why. I think it's just that, like you say, you have a very regimented routine. And because you have a routine and you want to try and fit a lot of things in, when you're busy, I think time generally goes quicker.
Good angle.
Yeah.
Good angle.
Yeah. So like you said, and when you're free and, you're maybe relaxing a little bit, not spending every minute doing something, time, I think, goes a little bit slower. And maybe it's also that you're a little bit agitated that you want to do more. So, you want to try and fit your Quran in, you want to fit some reading in, you want to fit some speaking to brothers in. So because you're trying to fit so much in, I think that makes it go quicker. And then there's Taraweeh to fit in as well, obviously. So all of a sudden, the amount of spare time you have in the day squeezes a lot. I'm not sure why I've been thinking about it, but I assume that's why the reason is.
Bro, I think you smashed it there. I think you've answered my question. All these years I've been wondering why. And today on this podcast, you've answered it. Because to be honest with you, even like yesterday, I was like just sat outside in the garden for a bit in the sun. It was sunny and stuff. And then it just dawned on me. I thought I could be doing something better, like maybe reading some Quran or something like that, or preparing for this podcast even. So you're right. It's like you want to make most of it.
Yeah. I was going to say something similar, to be honest with you, that every year you think, every year Ramadan creeps upon you, but when you're in Ramadan, it goes so quick. But obviously, if you were to ask any of you is there any time of the day where you sit there thinking, twiddling your thumbs, like, what shall I do? You don't think that because you've always got something to do, especially when you're involved in this type of activity, when you're involved in the dawah, and we've got this online, obviously we're running the Votu page. You're constantly thinking, okay, what am I going to do next? Do I need to work on some posters? Do I need to...
That's true, because when we were young, when I was young, I remember like you'd be waiting for iftar, twiddling your thumbs, like, when's the food going to be ready? Continually asking your mum, like, oh, when's the food going to be ready? When's it iftar? How long do we have? How many hours left? But now, like, iftar just jumps on you and you're like, well, subhanAllah, like, when did the time come? But I don't, you guys know, obviously, I've had a baby as well. Alhamdulillah, recently, so he's only 3 weeks old. So I know Rash and Maj have got kids, so they're probably like, yeah, welcome to our world. But no, that totally changes everything, because your time where I had like a plan and some logic around what I'm going to do in Ramadan, that's gone out the window, because when he's crying, he's not going to tell me when he's planning to cry or when he needs to be fed and stuff like that. And his mum does quite a lot, but obviously I need to help out, and modern man and everything, so I can't just leave it all to her. But alhamdulillah, it's good. It's been good. It's been a blessed Ramadan, but like you said, it's gone rapid.
All I'll say is just make sure brother Daniel Hakikaju doesn't listen to this podcast, bro. He's going to be on your case, man.
You'll deal with me.
Modernist Muslim.
Me and Madge a bit more old school, I think.
Yeah, sure, man. But now it's good, man. It's good. But like you said, it's a new experience with the kid in the house. And I think you guys have made valid points, because already, even when you just say you've had your food, right, you're already looking at the time, because you need to get to Taraweeh. And also, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but with the mosques like implementing some sort of social distance and stuff, then you can only probably get half the amount of people that you normally would do. So you need to make sure you're there on time, and it's not in the old school ways of just walking in just before Isha. You got to be there before, and so you get a small amount of time even after iftar. And then when it comes into the week where you're working, when you come back from Taraweeh and stuff, you're already thinking about, okay, I probably need to get a bit of sleep and get up for suhoor because I'm working the next day. So you're right. You're constantly looking at the watch. And I think that's the reason why, time does go quick. But I think also because of the blessings we know, the amount of blessings that are in this month, and as Khairul sort of alluded to, certainly for the people who are maybe a bit more proactive on the dawah scene, that this month is the month where people will open their hearts to you, and there's people a bit more receptive because of the blessed month itself, and also because that the activity you do, which is obligatory anyway, the dawah and stuff, you got to do that anyway. But when the Prophet ﷺ talks about the rewards multiplying to a great extent, then you're not just doing a sunnah action here, you're doing something which is needed, something which is obligatory. So inshallah ta'ala, Allah accepts it from us. We could be really making a lot of progress for the akhirah, i.e. the next life. But cool, inshallah. Let's move on to the few topics we have, a couple of segments we have for today's podcast. And I want to start off on the issue of Derek Chauvin, the issue of the murder of George Floyd. We know that on the 21st of April, i.e. about 5 days, 25th, 5 days ago, Derek Chauvin, he was found guilty of murdering George Floyd last year on the 25th of May. And we know that this issue caused, uproar around the world. The movements like Black Lives Matter became very prominent. We saw, even up until now, we see that, some sports events, people are still taking the knee in reference to this. Now, the question that I want to pose, and I think is worth discussing, okay, for anyone who knows the history of America, certainly with its racial relations and certainly with its Afro-American population, it's been really, really bad. There's no other way to put it. But with Joe Biden coming out, making a statement about moving ahead, about a lot of work to do and so on, the question I think is worth discussing: is this like a watershed moment? Is this now the end of racism in America? Is this event, this prosecution of Derek Chauvin, do you think this is the start of the eradication of racism as we know it in the United States of America? Brother JK, I'm going to drop this one on you. Give us your views. Actually, to be honest with you, it may well be that some people don't know what's happening, so it might be a good idea just to give a bit of explanation of what actually happened and take it from there, bro.
It's like you said. So most people should know the fact that the George Floyd killing. So, it was one of those things that it kind of went global. Like everyone in the world knew about this. It was a massive event, and like you said, led to mass protests. But just the background, for those who don't know, basically George Floyd, he walked into a shop and he bought something, and he apparently gave counterfeit money. So when the shopkeeper saw this, he was a bit afraid to kind of confront him, and he called the police to say, look, this guy's got counterfeit money, which is, it's a crime. but it's not it's not that bad of a crime that you'd think it would lead to such actions of Derek Chauvin. So then that 9-minute video came out of Derek Chauvin basically stamping on his neck with his knee, and other officers actually watching and keeping people back. And what's his name, George Floyd, he was saying he kept saying the words "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," and this statement itself became like the slogan of the mass protests. I can't breathe. And he eventually died. And this is what, like you said, led to many people not just talking about this one incident. This one incident was the trigger point, really, for many Afro-Americans and others that knew about, what the situation happening, to raise the alarm, to say, look, this is not just a one-off moment. This has been happening for far too long in America, as well as globally. Throughout the world, people started speaking out to say, look, this isn't just an American issue. This is an issue that's happening across the Western world. And there were other protests, BLM, like you said, BLM protests happening. So after all of that happened, obviously the trial took place. It was a public trial. People could watch online and things like that. So it was because it was such a key event, people wanted to, it was in the public interest to put it live. And he was charged on all 3 counts that he was being held for 2nd degree, 3rd degree manslaughter and murder. And he's found guilty for all 3. And he hasn't been sentenced yet, but he will be. And he could face decades in prison. I don't think he'll face the death penalty, but he could face decades in prison. So that's still what's happening. And the other 3 officers that were there, they're also being held on trial. Obviously, they would have hoped that he would not have been found guilty, because then that would mean that they can't find other people guilty if they don't find the main persecutor guilty. So they will face, for their part they played in allowing it to happen and not stopping him, they will also face punishment. But going back to your question as to whether this is a watershed moment, is it going to be the end of racism in America? The fact is, no. This ruling, there was no doubt this ruling would happen, because if you imagine, it was such a politicized event that everyone had their eyes on this ruling from the judge. So if they had found him not guilty, it would have led to civil war, not even protests. It would have led to civil war in America, and it would pit blacks against whites and those who of color probably against whites. So they didn't want that. Obviously, they don't want that image of America. However, that is the image of America. America is still racist. I don't know whether you know, there's a mural of George Floyd in one of, I can't remember what state, it might be in Minneapolis, where he's from. There's a mural of him. You might have seen it. It's like a cartoon face of him. Yeah, you would have seen the image though. You might not see the mural.
Graffiti on the wall.
Yes, the graffiti on the wall. Yeah. That was defaced, and basically they said, I'm not going to say the words, but they said, N-word, lives don't matter, and that was So they defaced that. So you tell me, has racism ended in America? Of course it hasn't. It's still there, whether it's the undertone of the political system and establishment, which it absolutely is, not just with Trump, but also Democrats. Just because a Democrat comes to power, that doesn't mean racism just all of a sudden goes. And also it exists in the public and societal sphere as well. People, not everyone, but there are large parts of that population that continue to be racist and hold these views.
Okay, I mean, the thing is even I think the next day, a 16-year-old girl was shot dead as well, 4 times in the chest. Someone could argue, she had a knife on her, but if someone's got a knife, you could, these are trained officers. It's not like us lot with a paintball gun. You know what I mean? They can shoot them in the knee, they can do whatever they want, but 4 shots to a 16-year-old straight in the chest is like as if the lives don't really lives don't matter. But and also even there was actually the police department in Ohio, who on their Facebook page, straight after the verdict, there was a statement made about, like when Chauvin got sentenced, he stood up and he just put his hands behind his back and he got, handcuffed, and they took him away. And the statement was that if George Floyd had done that, then maybe we wouldn't be here today. And then the police department came out to apologize and said, it was just a police officer who was meant to put it on his own Facebook page, but he put it on the police department Facebook page, right? So obviously, this one incident isn't going to do that. But is the problem attitudes of people? Is it do white people in America feel that they are superior to people of color, or is there something which is more of a systematic problem here at hand, where even if you bring a black president in, or a a colored vice president, female, either Kamala Harris, right, that in reality these are just like token gestures, and they don't really bring about that change? Is there like a underlying issue which just a person being elected won't change?
I think before we answer that question, maybe one of the other brothers can answer that question. But one thing to note here is, and it's linked to the trial that took place, is that those people who are looking for justice, looking for some sort of punishment for these people who carry out brutality against black people or minorities, a punishment in itself, is that going to be sorry, my screen is just...
We can still hear you.
We can still see you, we can still hear you, so carry on, bro.
Sorry. Is that going to remove racism from the minds of people? It's not, is it? I mean, somebody who is racist, blatantly racist, has these prejudices in their mind. If they are punished by the system for whatever action that they have carried out, does it mean that tomorrow they're going to be best friends with with a black person? And are they going to, is that those racist thoughts going to be removed from their mind?
Yeah,
it's not. No kind of punishment is going to lead to that. It requires a complete overhaul of the way that they think. A lot of people in this country will say, look, they need education, and I understand what they mean by that. But it's not education per se. It's completely, decoding the way that somebody thinks, uprooting that thought and replacing it with a purer thought. And that's the only way that racism will be eradicated.
Ideologically.
From an ideological perspective. It's not just by handing out punishments.
So what you're saying is racism is a thought, and it's just how people think. So they have these discrimination against people. So you punish someone, that doesn't mean necessarily that he's going to actually think, I was wrong because I'm being punished.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. So, I mean, actually, okay, with what you've just said there, and with the question I asked in regards to a systematic issue, if this is what people are thinking, where is this? Because obviously these ideas come from somewhere, don't they? I mean, whether it's media, whether it's the government, or whether it's upbringing, like when you see a little kid, I remember, if there's like a 4 or 5 year old, probably not that young, but you see a kid saying, in the old days, you say "Paki this, Paki that." They don't know what a Paki is. They're obviously just repeating stuff that they heard from home. They're just mimicking it, right? So these ideas, this discrimination, this evil, erroneous thought, it comes from somewhere. Okay, so A, where does it come from? And then B, I guess from what you're saying is that where it comes from needs to be changed, so that a pure thought comes to people, which is not full of discrimination and like, for example, racism. So what do you got? Rash, you haven't spoken, bro. Come on.
Yeah, no, it's cool. The thing is, the way you've got to look at it is there's already deep rifts within the psyche, particularly in America. And again, remember, this isn't limited to America. This is a global problem, especially a Western world problem. Yeah. So this idea of there being kind of superiority and inferiority, you have to go back and look at history. And from a historic point of view, we see this inferiority and superiority comes from when, the white man oppressed the black man. Yeah. So that is deeply rooted. And the reason we see it in America at such a scale is it's practically written into their amendments. Yeah. It's written into their constitution. So when Khairul says about, the thoughts, that's important. That's probably the most important point, because that's the only way you can eradicate it, because you have to make people think differently. But it's very difficult to make people think differently if the whole constitution and their whole, say, take the 13th Amendment, like the abolishment of slavery. And I'm not going to give a history lesson and talk about, what happened originally and all of the Native Americans being killed and all of that. But it is linked to that. To just give one element of it, the 13th Amendment, it highlights that, slavery is abolished apart from for a punishment. So if you're punishing in the prison system, or if you're punishing someone because they did something wrong, then a type of slavery is allowed because you can use them for slave labor within the prison system. So what you've now got is you've got a society which over the years have imprisoned and mass incarcerated more and more people and caused this divide. So the thought is already there that Black people already feel inferior because when they do something, they get chucked in prison. When they do something, they get pulled over in their car. But when a white person does the same thing, they don't. Those aren't things that will just be changed just because, there's one case and there's one change, someone gets second-degree murder. What I would say, though, quickly is that this is quite a significant sentence on the basis that up to now, police officers generally get away with it. They never get done for second-degree murder. It's usually either at best like manslaughter, and more often than not they get away with it because they're in a position of authority. So it might have an impact, but that doesn't take away from the fact that in their constitution they say that, let's throw people into prison, and then these prisons are private. This is the big problem. These are private institutions, that are there from, a lot of them are money-making institutions. Prisons in America have been privatized. Not all of them.
Bro, it's a massive business.
It's a huge industry. And what is it? It's slavery. We still have modern day slavery in the so-called most progressed secular it's insane, isn't it? And they're exporting their way of life to Muslim lands, remember, democracy and their way of life, but they're the country that still has modern day slave labor, and not just slave labor in terms of let's get people into prisons and then use them. Remember, right at the beginning, if you go back to the American Civil War, and I'll pass it on to someone because my point's quite long, but if you look at the Civil War, you'll notice that initially when slavery was abolished, there wasn't enough labor. So a lot of the southern states, what they did was they started throwing Black people into prison off the back of petty crime. And sometimes not even petty crime. There's loads of examples of just someone just loitering. And what did they do? We chuck him in prison. Why? Because we need, our amendment, our 13th Amendment says we can get labor off as a means of punishment. So exactly. Can you see how this is so deeply ingrained into their constitution and their systems and their amendments? Just one particular case is not going to change that. And that's why I don't think this is the end of racism in America.
So JK, what's the problem here, man? What's obviously Rasha spoke about the prison industry and we know that there's a prison boom certainly after the civil rights movements as well. So we're talking about something which is deep rooted. What is the problem, bro?
So it's as Rash was saying. The thing is, the way you need to view slavery wasn't just done because of the thought that Black people are inferior and Indians and these people are inferior to them. Obviously that's what they believe, but the other probably more primary reason is that it made them money. Like you guys are saying, this was it was slave trade, right? So this made them lots of money, especially in the Republican states. They made so much money from the slave trade, right? Even in Britain, actually, not just America. In a lot of countries that were primarily involved in this, they made a lot of money from slavery. So when they needed to, there came a point where they needed to abolish slavery, but they did it in name only. Like Rash said, it was It was a statement to say, look, we've abolished slavery. The 13th Amendment itself is the abolishment of slavery. But ironically, the 13th Amendment is the same amendment that has, bring slavery back. Yeah. So like Rash is saying, for petty crimes, there were mass incarceration of Black people. And if you say, oh, that was back then in the 1800s or whatever, that was, this, you're talking about history. That's not the case. If you take the stats and data now and look at the proportion of Black people in prison compared to non-Blacks, it's massive, huge. So why is that? Because the mentality remained that, as Rash is saying, for smaller crimes. Or the thing is, no one's saying that Black people don't commit crime. Lots of people commit crime in the Western lands. No one said that. Even George Floyd was committing a crime. No one's saying they don't commit crime. That girl who was, had a knife, she was committing a crime. But the point people are making is that they are, the punishment and the consequences of their crimes are far greater and, not warranted. That's the problem. And that, just because of their color, of their skin. So going back to your question, what is the actual problem? The problem is capitalism itself, the system that their ideology, the system that they have embraced. And people might think, okay, what's capitalism got to do with racism or slavery? But it has, because capitalism, what is it? What is capitalism? Capitalism is primarily about benefit. So their criteria in life for a capitalist is expediency and benefit. How can I make as much wealth and profit and fulfill all my desires as much as possible? How can I do this? So they will do anything. They will anything. It's not about having morals or humanity. They will do whatever is required to make as much money as possible. So slavery was in the interest of capitalists. Incarceration of Black people is in the interest of capitalists. And there's a quote of I think it was Kipling. There's a book he wrote called The White Man's Burden. So the white man's burden, what is it? The white man in this case is the capitalist. It's not just
you're not on about Mr. Kipling, are you?
Not Mr. not your apple pies, no. No. So he said, look, the white man's burden is something that they have colonized all these lands. They have got all of these non-whites under their control, under the colonial system, under imperialism. So their burden is this. Now that they have this, what they're going to do with them. So this is reflects back to the point that capitalism leads to racism, because they want to push their interests. They want to gain as much benefit and wealth as much as possible. So because of this, that's what's led to racism. And we also know that many of these Americans, they're ultra nationalists, aren't they? So for them, they are very patriotic. And for them, although America itself was built on racism, the fact that they wiped out the Native Americans, for them, being American and, being like the Republicans are probably even stronger Americans in that sense, where they're so patriotic. But why is it that, Trump supporters have this trait of racism? Because that in itself is, expounds racism, that, we are American, we are white Americans, we don't want Black people doing this, we don't want people of color doing this. They've got hatred against Mexicans. Why is it that Trump, I know he's not around anymore, but why did he want the wall? Because they push this. And just because someone is replaced, so Trump is replaced by Biden, that doesn't mean racism has gone, because even before Trump, racism was there, even under Obama. But what Trump did is, when he came to power, he brought them out in the open. All these people that were holding it back, holding it within themselves, probably, subtle racism, they thought, now we've got an opportunity to actually show it, be brazen about our racism. And they came out. And likewise, now that Biden's in, maybe they will push back a little bit, but it still exists. Why did they deface that mural? Because there's people still out there that didn't agree with the Derek Chauvin sentence. They didn't agree with this. So yeah, it is very systemic, and institutionalized racism is not an exaggeration.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, please make sure to subscribe to all of our socials, especially YouTube. And if for any reason you're not enjoying this podcast, then please make sure to contact us on Facebook or Instagram and let us know what we can do better and how we can improve. Jazakallah khair.
It's something that exists and will carry on existing.
I'm glad you made that point, really. That point about, I think what people fail to see sometimes is, in society, because especially take UK, for example, because when you go out on the street, there's so much multiculturalism. Yeah, and you see people of all colors and creeds and cultures everywhere. There's this fake view that, oh, okay, we've progressed and we've gone beyond this idea of disunifying by color and things like that. From a superficial point of view, that's how it looks. But I'm glad you made the point, because America, and when Trump came into power, highlighted, and actually social media also highlights the deep divisions and the thoughts that people carry. Because remember, when take your office, for example, you go into your office and there's people of all types. Why do they say you can't talk about politics and religion in your office? They know that people have certain thoughts that if you allow them to fester in a work environment, there will be clashes. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's key, because people are carrying those thoughts, as Khairul was saying earlier. People are carrying those thoughts, but they've superficialized, even if might not be a word, they've superficialized the society, so that we look at society and go, look, we've progressed because we all live together. But actually, the ideas that people carry are still very divisionary. Yeah. And still racism exists heavily. So if they're trying to say, and they try to promote to us, don't they, that we're a progressed civilization. Yeah, look, we, as from Darwinian evolution and all of those kind of things, they're saying that we're progressing. Technologically, we're getting better. Societally, we're so-called getting better. And look at our situation today, we're progressed. But actually, when you look at these type of examples and all these clashes that are happening, these protests against what's happening in America, actually, they're more divided than they've ever been. And people's viewpoint towards other people is horrific when you let them say how they really feel. And that's what we saw in America. And that's key. And I'm glad you also mentioned capitalism, because if you take that back to the prison system, look, some of these private prisons, for example, the number of black people in prisons compared, like you said, is astronomical in comparison. And someone might argue, someone might say, wait there a minute, that's because black people commit more crime than white people. But what is crime? Yeah, their crime, the way they see crime is stealing and, drug abuse and all of these things. But, stealing and drug abuse, which might account for the majority of people in prison, those things have been created by capitalism. Yeah. The real crimes are actually, these so-called capitalists who avoid tax and have got richer and richer and richer. They're the reason there's poverty and ghettoization in places like America. When you have ghettoization and you have poverty, it leads to stealing. It leads to crime. If you then throw all the blacks into that area and you ghettoize them and you don't allow them to get out of that, what do you get? You get this. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Just to add to that point just there, though, you're talking about ghettoization, and like as though they could have naturally allowed it to occur, but just to accelerate it, do you guys know that they actually pumped cocaine into black communities?
100%.
They pumped drugs into black communities. Why? Firstly, to make them addicted, because it's a drug, right? They can be addicted and they would never rise up. And secondly, they could use this to then arrest them.
Exactly.
So they actually accelerated it.
Exactly. So, this is the crime that the capitalism has created, this crime. Exactly. And, it's the same elitist capitalists who are profiting from those prisons. And that tends to be the white man. Yeah. So look at it from the other point of view. They have, in some of these private prisons, do you know what they have in the clauses? They have occupancy clauses. This is horrendous. Occupancy clause says to the state, and this is what I want to make this point, to the state, what the occupancy clause says is if you don't get this many people into your prisons, we're a private organization, we need to make money. We'll look after your prisons because you've got too many people, and look, the state can't afford it. So let us bring a private organization in to manage your prison. Sounds from the it sounds crazy that this could even happen, but this is happening. So we'll create a private prison for you. You're struggling with your criminals. Let them come in. But, you know, if we're going to pay for this out of our money, you need to support us. The way you support us is here's a clause in your contract that says you need to have 95% occupancy. So therefore, the state goes, oh, damn, we're not reaching our occupancy. Let's chuck a few more people in prison. Otherwise, we're going to breach our contract and we're going to have to pay a fine. Who pays that fine? The taxpayer.
Yeah.
How it's insane if you think about it. And it's happening to this day. I just thought I had to make that point.
It's mad. And like you said, the occupancy is, how is it achieved? Throwing black people in prison. It's not even as though they are equal in that will go around all our communities and get people. They're just pick the easiest target, and that's what capitalism is. It's survival of the fittest. So for them, it's like it's a cancer. So they will, you know, any weak or, you know, minority that they can get hold of, they will grasp them and they will chuck them, and there'll be no equality or humanity in that.
Another point as well is that going back to the point that Khairul made at the beginning about the thought about, you know, people carrying a thought which makes them feel like they're superior to other people and looks down on people of color, especially black people, as inferior. Now, with it being a thought, this also means that this cannot be removed through legislation. So even if you now make stricter laws, or you make, you know, just say they add even amend the constitution, even just say, even if they were just to go beyond the 13th constitution and 13th article, but the point is that the laws are not going to make this problem go away. And as you guys have highlighted, the problem is due to the system, the system of life that the people adopt. And within this system, it's inherent. And we see this not just in America, we see this in the Western world, certainly, that, you know, the capitalists are the real power, and the capitalists are predominantly, if not all, white. It just so happens to be that way. And that the problems of whether it's George Floyd or whoever it is, these issues issues of racism and discrimination are not going to be resolved through any legislation or through a black president or an Indian vice president. You know, what needs to change is the system. And we could talk about how Islam is the solution to this, as Malcolm X said many years ago, that the only solution for racism in America is Islam. But I'm not going to go down that route, because I just want to discuss with you guys about the issue of the George Floyd killing. But we know that Islam is the solution. And if people want to listen back to probably about a year ago, we did the podcast on the George Floyd issue, and we covered this. So, you know, we're speaking about capitalists, we're speaking about greed. JK mentioned about greed, about the reason why. I think Sim made a very good point a year ago on from the podcast. And look, in capitalist literature, it doesn't say anything about racism, but the actual implementation is that, you know, the strong will oppress the weak, and the weak being those people of color and black people. So we know that this is about the ideology. This is about greed. Okay, now I want to take this discussion on a different route now. Okay, from the streets of America to Europe, and to what I should say is inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I don't know even if I can say that or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. But the European Super League, which lived for a very long 2 days, we see that this caused chaos. This unified people around Europe, certainly in England, Britain, who you would not have thought about. And there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, because it's not just about sports. We're talking about greed and stuff, and that's all you've been listening to on you've had the Prime Minister talk about greed, you've had the ministers, and these are capitalists themselves. So I'm sure I'm going to get your views on why these capitalists are actually calling out greed, because that's just the way it is, right? But okay, Khairul, I'm going to drop this to you. Just in case someone doesn't know about what's happening with the European Super League, they might not be into sports. Give us just a summary of what happened and what are your thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, so obviously anyone who's listening who follows football will know in detail probably what's happened. Those who don't really follow sports and football might have heard about it, but don't know too much. So basically, in Europe, we have they have like a set structure and format of football where each and every country will have their own domestic football teams. They all play in their own domestic football leagues, which include the big clubs and clubs that are smaller, and they have a whole structure going down to grassroots football. And the European Super League, in short, was basically the big football clubs, not just in the UK, but in Spain, in Italy. They call them, basically the biggest football clubs in the world that are bringing in, that have the most supporters, have the most financially powerful. They all came together in like secret kind of cartel mode. The owners of these clubs thought, okay, they already make a lot of money, but after COVID and the effects of COVID, some of these big clubs have been making hits or getting hits in the sense that they weren't making losses. They just weren't making as much money as they were before. And they have been kind of discussing this behind the scenes for a few years. This is not something that's just come out of the blue. There's been talk of this coming out, or this new kind of Super League format coming out. So they came together and thought, okay, what can we do to ensure and guarantee that we continue to thrive financially? So they came up with the idea of a European Super League where the big clubs all have all break away from their domestic football leagues, and create this separate Super League where they all play each other, and they're all guaranteed to be in it year in, year out. They basically will not allow any other clubs to come and form part of it. They did say that there are about 4 or 5 spots were available for other clubs to come and play in it, but these select 12 football clubs, and then they were looking to increase that to about 15, would be in this Super League and continuously be playing in it. Currently, the system is that these clubs need to finish in the top 2, 3, 4 places in their leagues in order to play in the current Champions League European football, and that's where they make the money, playing in European football, Champions League football. But there's a threat to them in the sense that if a club doesn't finish in those top places, they fall out of that European league, and they're not able to then make the amount of money that they can. So they wanted to set up a system where they're guaranteed to be playing European football against the big top European clubs, and basically rake it in. But that was killing the competition completely, i.e. football and its spirit. And this was why the fans were so against it, and not just the fans, the players, the managers, everyone involved in football who kind of understands what it's all about, they were so against it because it was completely killing competition and completely killing the spirit of football, and that, that dream, like what Leicester City did, where they defied all odds and won the Premier League and managed to get into playing European football. That was gone. That dream with this new format was just not going to be there anymore. So I don't know if that kind of explains things for those who probably...
Yeah, sure.
But that's basically what happens. In terms of what we think about it, I'm sure we're going to try and link this to, because we don't want to talk about just football
Let me dive in at that point, because when I said to Madge, I want to cover this topic, and Madge was like, why do you want to cover a football topic especially in the middle of Ramadan? And that's a valid point, because really these things are worldly affairs that, certainly in the month of Ramadan, we shouldn't be wasting our time with it. But there was a reason why I wanted to cover this topic, because it does highlight, as we've been talking about capitalism, it does highlight greed, and it exposes the fallacy of capitalism. Because without sticking to any of the footballing elements, this European Super League was purely about those capitalists not making a loss and just exploiting the whole game for their continued profit. Yeah, to the extent that they're willing to kill anything that people love about football, like you mentioned, the spirit and the competition and all of these things. And the reason why I wanted us to speak about it is because it shows that, these people who are so detached from the common man, people find their comforts from, going and watching a match on the TV, going to work, coming home. And remember, sport, where did sport come from? Sport was like a distraction, from like the Romans. Sport was like a distraction from the ills of society, and actually even some of the way in which the leaders treated people and managed their affairs. Sport was used as a distraction, and football is a distraction, but football is a very interesting distraction, because in the terms of, people are so in love with football, certainly in the UK, it's like a religion.
Yeah.
It's like Deen al-Islam, Deen al-Football. It goes from Deen of people love football so much, but the reason why it's important to understand it is, we know as human, when you look at human beings have like an instinct. It's like a spiritual instinct. Yeah, they've got within them this reverence instinct. Revere something, look up to something. We know as Muslims that we satisfy that by revering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We satisfy that by knowing when Allah tells us that we've been created to worship him. Yeah, we satisfy that and we get tranquility from that. What ends up happening is those people who don't come to the truth, and actually Muslims have been affected by this as well, they get this, things like football and things like entertainment, actually, they use that as the way to satisfy that instinct. And I think it's important for people to take scenarios like this and realize, people go and watch football on TV or at stadiums and things like that. But who are the people that are profiting from their time? What you're doing is you're neglecting potentially working towards solving some of these problems, these capitalist problems, remember. And what you're doing is probably spending more time following sport. Look at the type of coverage this has had versus, when they were trying to abolish, they're trying to get rid of racism in sport. This has had wall-to-wall coverage, for the last week, talked about in mainstream news, not just sport news, in mainstream news. And the reason is because that this is so important to them. But at the same time, what it does is it gets people to stop thinking about the real world problems and start thinking about, something that they feel is sometimes more important to them. And, and that was just one of my reasons for wanting to discuss it.
I think it is a good topic to discuss because, like you said, it's not just about football, but it actually, you can make a lot of parallels with the society, with this whole incident, this whole event. And it's like you said, they treat football and sport as a religion. And that's not an exaggeration. They do. Like, you see banners in football games where they have like kids, football, wife, in that order. That's their priority.
There's actually banners that say, our club,
it's
our religion.
Yeah, exactly.
And these hardcore fans will actually say it, that this is like a religion to us.
It is. When they lose, they're proper depressed, and when they win, they're happy. And I think in both scenarios they probably resort to alcohol. So I think that's what they do. But what the point I'm making is that it is a religion to them. And if you think about it, let's go back a bit. Yeah, what is our purpose in life? We know as Muslim, our purpose in life is to worship Allah, right? This is our purpose. So the purpose of jinn and mankind is to worship Allah. So what is their purpose? Allah even tells us in the Quran what their purpose is. Those who don't have that purpose, their purpose is to make their whims and desires their gods. So football is just part of their whims and desires. So even if it costs them money, even if it's going to cost them tickets to get to a match or get Sky Sports or whatever it may be, they will spend that amount because their purpose in life is to fulfill their desires, their whims. And one of their whims and desires is to get entertainment from football. So this whole ESL thing that's happened, I was looking into it thinking, if you think about it, one of the benefits of the ESL for these clubs is that they're going to make subnormal profits and revenues from joining the ESL because it's much more revenue than what the UEFA Champions League gave, as well as it's guaranteed. So you don't need to they reduce the risk. And for a capitalist, risk is really negative. You want to minimize risk as much as possible. You want to guarantee that cash, right? So this ESL sounded like a very, profitable option for many of these clubs and these owners, the Glaziers, the American owners across all of these clubs. They're the ones that actually came up with it. So my question to myself was, okay, if this is a way of gaining more wealth and more profit for these clubs and capitalists, why didn't it actually happen? Why did it, like you guys said, only lasted 2 days? What happened here? Because in a capitalist system, anything that generates wealth and profit generally happens. The moral and the humanitarian, elements of it aren't really considered. It's all about how we make as much money as possible. Even the economy. Why is it that GDP, gross domestic product, is seen as the be all and end all? That is the king of all measures, because for them, prosperity, success is based on how much wealth a country can gain, how much productivity a country can earn, right? So the reason I think it fell, as Khairul and Rash has been saying, the reason I think it didn't last for longer than 2 days is that it's not really profit that people seek, right? We think in capitalism, capital and profit is the end king of what they're seeking to gain, and it is, but we have to ask why. Why do people want money? It's in order to fulfill their whims and desires. It's not, they're not just going to keep money and do nothing with the money. They want to buy their cars, their houses, they want to live the dunya, right? So going back to this football ESL thing, right? Why this didn't go through is that there was a clash here. That on one hand, football and the clubs will make lots of money, and I'm not sure whether you know, but football is a massive income generator for the actual economy as well, for tourism, the actual taxes they pay, when they pay, it makes a lot of money for them. So that's why Boris Johnson and others are quite involved as well, because it influences the economy. So why is it that it didn't work? Is because it's not really money that's the main point. It's desires and whims and benefit, right? And in economics, there's a principle in economics, capitalist economics, called utility. So their principle is that man, as an individual, he will seek to maximize his utility. What utility means, it's a technical term, but utility just means that he will seek to maximize his pleasure, right?
The benefit, isn't it?
Benefit, yeah. His benefit. He will seek to maximize his benefit. That's how they view the individual. They view him as a material object, a material being. That any action he does is to seek material gain, right? And that's what they call utility. And the theory of marginal utility, basically, not to get too technical, but basically it means that when you initially consume something, the maximum value is in the initial consumption, and then it gets reduction. So I'll give you an example just to highlight. So I'll ask Majid, when you're going to break your iftar, right, you got a plate of samosas, yeah? Plate of samosas. Which samosa tastes the best? The first samosa or the 10th samosa?
Bro, all 20. But the first one.
The first one, isn't it? Because the first one, that's when you're craving it, you're hungry, you have that first samosa. But after a while, each samosa tastes less and less.
After a while, you turn around to the miss, say, why are these so oily for?
You start to complain, yeah, exactly. But that's their theory of marginal utility, that the first consumption is the best, right? So this is their principle, that they want to maximize utility, maximize pleasure and material gain. So taking it back to ESL, the reason this didn't work is that one of the tenets of football and one of the principles of football is competition. Like, people like the fact that you have to compete to gain. You have to, you have to actually earn your right to get to the top 4 of the Premier League and then to qualify for the Champions League. And then even in the Champions League, there can be smaller clubs that you have to beat and actually win. If all of that is gone and you're guaranteed, say, European football, and there's no difference between who comes top, who becomes last, and there's no relegation, nothing, it defeats the whole purpose of football. So what happens there in economic terms is that the utility is not there, the pleasure is not there. You're going to watch a football match and think, it doesn't really matter if I win or lose. Nothing's going to really happen. So it just kills the pleasure. Why is it that we don't have as much pleasure in watching a friendly game? Because it doesn't mean anything.
That's true.
There's that saying, isn't it, that the buzz that you get from the win is because you've gone through the pain of the loss previously.
Absolutely. And as United fans, we want to win. Like, we're all United fans, right? We're all on win, right? But we want to win. We want to actually gain it. We want to actually be worthy of the win.
Bro, we want to win the United way.
Exactly. We want to win the United way, yeah. Sorry, Kerry, go on.
Just to add on to what JK is saying there, this is really interesting. But you're right. What they've done is, what in principle, from a capitalistic perspective, what these club owners wanted to achieve is no different to what Google did in terms of buying out all of the rival online advertising vendors, or what Facebook did in buying out Instagram and WhatsApp, or Starbucks and Costa Coffee do in terms of buying out all of these local cafe shops and establishing like 10, 20. I don't know why you need that many Starbucks in one area, but it's all about killing off the competition and monopolizing. So in principle, that's what these owners wanted to do. From a capitalistic perspective, there's no different to what these other corporations do out there. And I'll touch on that afterwards a little bit as well. But just to make the point, what they did wrong here is they committed, from a business perspective, the ultimate sin, which is they killed off their brand. They killed off the product, because the product is what JK is explaining there, having competition and that football spirit of football. By doing what they wanted to do, it was killing off the product completely. It wasn't going to work. And they quickly realized that after seeing not only did the fans were against it, but their own players and managers were completely against it. There was no product there. It would have fallen down very quickly anyway. But like I was saying, it's no different to what these other organizations do in the business world. So shouldn't there be that conversation now amongst the masses here about their ideology now? Actually, it could be a good thing in the sense that now these, the non-Muslims themselves will start questioning, like, hold on a second, look, what's going on here?
But you say that, well, this is the thing. This is what people probably didn't appreciate it. Or some people did come out and say that we lost football the day we allowed these billionaire owners to come in and buy our clubs, who are not fans of the club but just did it purely for profit making. And that's a good point. So some people did see it like that, and that was another reason for looking at this, because the common fan nowadays, especially if you speak to like a 12, 13-year-old FIFA player, and even in some of these games, what do you have? Oh, there's like a mode in there that allows you to have a billionaire owner come along, buy you, and all of a sudden you can play fantasy football where you can literally buy all of you can buy your Messis and your Ronaldos and your Erling Haalands and all of that, and all of a sudden you can hammer everybody. That's not competition either, is it? Yeah, if someone can just come along and just pump billions into a club and buy all the best players, that's not competition. But they allowed that. They allowed billionaire owners to come in because it was like, oh, okay, like JK saying, there's that element of utility. Yeah, they'll get that pleasure for, everybody doesn't get to have a billionaire. I'm going to get to have a billionaire. They're going to buy my club. I'm going to have all the best players. We're going to batter everybody else, and I'm going to enjoy it. So they allowed it to happen. But now that it was one step further, where all of a sudden the whole product is destroyed, oh, it's not okay anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And this links to hopefully my second point is what's interesting, and to look at this from an Islamic point of view, is we see our ummah divided, and people might think this is a funny link, or this might not be a applicable link, but our ummah is divided, and we're struggling to unite, even though there's a threat against Islam, Football, I wanted to use the European Super League and football as a little, micro analogy. Because what did we see when this European Super League happened? All of the fans that normally hate each other, what did they do? They all came together. The likes of Sky Sports and BBC, have you noticed they hardly ever even mention each other? So it's like a sin. Like if a BBC pundit mentions Sky Sports, it's like, oh, you can't give them publicity, and vice versa. Some of the players, they came out giving these heartfelt speeches where they went, oh, you need to bring BBC and Sky Sports and BT Sports. They all need to come together against this. Did you see how all of those allegiances suddenly dropped when their lovely football was being attacked? When football was being attacked, they all came together. And the reason why I'm linking this to Islam is, look, today Muslims, we're divided based on some people from a nationalistic point of view, some people from the point of view of all of these sects, some people from the point of view of certain differences of opinion. Actually, we're united on our Aqidah. If we actually recognize, in the way that these football fans and pundits recognize that there's this external threat to them, if we actually recognized that they're trying to change Islam, they put these borders in our lands, they disunited us, and we need to get rid of all of that to unite, in the same way as, these players and managers and stuff suddenly woke up. Remember, some of these people were in positions of influence as well. There's another little link, because the people on the ground, they carry certain thoughts. The football fans, they carried the thought that competition is needed, the relegation and the promotion is needed. I have to earn it. That's the thought they carried. The managers and some of the people in slightly more influential positions, say the ex-footballers and the footballers, they also carried that idea, but they are in positions of influence. Then these so-called owners, they don't carry these ideas. The owners are there purely for profit maximization, capitalism, wealth accumulation. That's what they're for. They detach themselves, but they have the power. What happened? The people of influence spoke. The people on the ground, their ideas came together and they saw a common enemy. They all came together, and what did they do? In 2 days, they overthrew this idea. Apply that to Islam. We carry common thoughts, but we're being divided. We have people in positions of influence that are not speaking out against the power structures. Imagine it's a synergy, isn't it? Unless you think otherwise, I think there's a link there where if we as an ummah look at that situation and go, that's how we need to deal with it. We need to put aside our tribalisms, and there shouldn't be tribalisms, remember, from an Islamic point of view. They put aside their tribalism. We unite because we have one Aqidah. We unite because we have one land. Forget these borders. And we have scholars. We have certain leaders that may be willing to speak out. We have people in positions of influence that can talk about this. And then we say to those people who hold the strings, they're not that powerful. These leaders that are treacherous, that are actually just held there in place by our enemies.
And one of the arguments people make is that they can't speak out. These scholars can't because they get paid by these people, and they will be imprisoned, and there'll be consequences. But so were the footballers. So were these. They were being paid by these owners. They must have felt a bit of if we speak out, there's going to be consequences. But actually, there's more to lose.
Well,
So they did speak out.
That's a sick point, because initially some of them were a bit afraid to speak out. But you know, when one spoke out and the masses reacted positively, then another player thought, well, if he can get away with it, I can get away with it. And then another and another and another, and it snowballs. And imagine if we see it now, don't we? When, say, Erdogan does a certain action, or a particular scholar comes out and bashes the West, people get behind it. But the problem is that snowball hasn't happened because of our disunity. If we unite and then people say the right things, that snowball will just continue to turn into an avalanche.
Yeah, it's a really good analogy, actually, because it helps people visualize actually the methodology of change. Because, like you were saying, you got certain influential people that are on like these media channels like Sky Sports, and Gary Neville, for example, who came out and he was actually saying this is an attack on football. And he actually used those words. It's an attack on us. It's an attack on football. We need to put aside all of our rivalries. Like you said, he was like, BT Sport, BBC, everyone needs to come together.
They called it a civil war. They called it a civil war.
Yeah, they called it a civil war. It was really like some sort of like, we need to go out and do some sort of military coup here against these owners. And it just shows that if we as an ummah understand that, look, there's an attack on Islam. And this is why we always, in our posts and a lot of our posts, we try to highlight like, look, there's a war on Islam here. They're trying to change our religion. They're trying to subjugate us, oppress us, and suppress Islam. And we need to understand that there is this attack on Islam. We need to come together as an ummah, unite, and against this common enemy. And any differences, that's fine. We can have differences. There's no wrong with having difference of opinions in certain things. But the key thing is we all are Muslim, and we all we all have one aqidah. Our aqidah is not different, in the same way that Gary Neville was saying, like, we all love football and the spirit of football, and this is, competition and all of those things, that this is what we are bonded on. Yeah, that's their aqidah almost. Like, it's a really good analogy that we can use. Like, as you're saying, it is a bit of a some people say it's a bit of a tenuous link, but it's a good way of expressing the methodology.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, please make sure to subscribe to all of our socials, especially YouTube. And if for any reason you're not enjoying this podcast, then please make sure to contact us on Facebook or Instagram and let us know what we can do better and how we can improve. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, and I mention it because, remember, we need to bring along the next generation. Yeah, the next generation has been influenced by these things. You know, our younger generation, when you speak to your youngsters, they've been influenced so heavily by things like entertainment. Remember, this whole European Super League thing, why did it even kick off? Is like they started saying that youngsters nowadays are not watching football much anymore. But why not? It's because there's so many types of entertainment now, be it your PS5s, be it your Netflix, be it your, all of these online platforms and things like that. There's so much entertainment that they're competing for people's eyeballs and people's touching their devices. They're competing for that. And what, from a capitalist point of view, they compete for it on the basis of, the more people we have viewing and using our product, the more money we make. From an Islamic point of view, we should be worried because our youth are being lost to this. Our youth are being distracted from their deen and distracted from the problems that our ummah is facing, because when you come home from school, college, university, work, it's very easy to detach and go, I'm not going to watch the news. I'm just going to go on my PlayStation or on Netflix or whatever, and I'm going to consume myself in this bubble of entertainment, because worrying about people's problems is a difficult thing and I can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. So we need to utilize some of these type of examples. Ask the youth, why is it that these people came together against this idea? You could definitely have a conversation with a lot of people about this topic versus sitting down with them and going, oh, this is how do we solve the problem of the Muslims? How do we solve the situation in Palestine, for example?
One thing I've always found, it's not just this ESL thing, but even just generally, like I've got friends who like football, and the amount of effort and analysis they'll go into a football match, right? The analysis they'll go into this event of this owner did this, or have you seen this, and the latest and this, like next level. Like it's like how, like, mashallah, you have the capacity, obviously, to analyze, right? But what about the same week, what's happening in Pakistan? What's happening in Afghanistan? The same week, these things are happening, but your interest and your capacity of thinking is being utilized for football. And, don't give me the excuse that you don't have the capacity to analyze. And, when we talk about Pakistan and Afghanistan and the Muslim Ummah, it's a case of, what's happening there? We don't really know. Actually, if you gave it a bit of thought and effort, and what is this for? This is for the sake of the Ummah. This is for the sake of Islam. This isn't a case of we do it for our hobby, which football is. This is a command from the Messenger of that whoever does not wake up thinking about the affairs of the Ummah is not from us. So if you're not taking that seriously and thinking about the Ummah, but you're more concerned about looking at your phone and seeing what the latest score is and analyzing every single goal, that tells you a lot, doesn't it? That where is our priorities? What are we more concerned about? What do we sleep thinking about? And what do we wake up thinking about? Is it football, or is it the affairs of the Ummah? Is it the Muslim affairs? That's one thing that I think you can reflect on and, highlight to certain Muslims. A lot of us, we are influenced by this, because this is as Rash was saying, this is what the entertainment is all about. It's a distraction. It's a way very similar to the Colosseums in Rome, a way of distracting the masses from the actual problems of society.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also, I think for the people in the West, I mean, you guys have clearly highlighted that the whole issue of ESL started it started because of greed. It started because of those people who are the owners. They did it for their own personal benefit, and they didn't really care about anything else. But I think what it is what we can see is that capitalism as an ideology, if you're going to think about the current times, whether it's the last couple of 100 years, I think that in regards to exploiting the world, probably this, during the capitalist era has been unprecedented. And what we see is that normal people you speak to, they talk about taxes, they talk about this, and they talk about problems. And, there's a famous saying of, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But people just go about it. I mean, I remember the years and years ago, I was very young at the time, but when there was like the riots on the poll tax, people came out, right? And and people thought Thatcher, and they always thought of a bad because of this. But the reality is that then they just changed it to something else, whether it's called council tax, for example, and things went on. And it just goes to show that because of the love for football, for once, the people just came out, and it looks like the capitalists, through the arrogance, they overstepped the mark. But what's going to happen? They're going to say, cool, we're not going to do this stuff now. That's fine. Everything's going to settle. The new season is going to start, and people are going to forget. People will forget. And this is the illusion that is cast over people about the dunya. And going back to what JK was saying about what is our purpose in life. And for them, it's every day is just about, having some excitement, satisfying their materialistic needs. And that's the thing, from an ideological point of view, people are not ideological, because people always complain about they're getting rinsed, the taxes are getting high, and VAT and stuff like that. But why is it that on this issue people got together? And it's because it's something that they loved. But as Muslims, going back to the issue what Rash was saying, we can't afford this type of attitude, because if tomorrow a leader comes in who says Islamic things, we all get excited, nothing changes. What's the value of that? What's the benefit of that? So real change happens when basically the people remove those obstacles, that deep state, those tentacles that Brash mentioned in the last podcast. When they remove these from our lands, in the same way, the capitalists are going to get away with doing things. Okay, they're going to learn that they overstepped the mark, but what actually changes, and nothing changes until the whole system isn't changed.
Yeah, let me give you another good little synergy. Yeah, you know what these capitalists were doing, you know, these billionaires of these clubs and stuff like that, detached from the common fan, what they were doing is the equivalent of letting the people who are the masters of wealth accumulation, you know, what are they good at? They're businessmen trying to make money. Yeah, they're the capitalists, and what they're trying to do is you're trying to ask them to design the solution. Yeah, it's the same as, you know, every year there's you know, have you heard of Davos? Every year there's a meeting at Davos of all of the so-called billionaires or these super powerful people. Yeah. And what they do is they discuss philanthropy, and they discuss how we can use our wealth. So they're the billionaires of the world. They sit down at round tables and discuss how can we use our wealth to solve social problems in the world. It sounds brilliant, because it's like saying these lot have the most money. There's all of these problems in the world. How do we solve them? But what comes out of Davos every year is, I don't know if you've heard of the term, it's called philanthrocapitalism. Yeah. So philanthrocapitalism is how capitalists, these billionaires, how they can use their wealth in a way where it looks like they're trying to benefit people, but actually what happens, they actually get richer. Yeah. So what they do is they invest in foundations and donor advised foundations and all of these things, yeah, which actually turn out to be just more ways of them getting richer. Yeah. So the common way to look at what happens at Davos is, oh, you're asking the people who are experts at accumulating wealth to solve the problem of wealth distribution. It's insane. You're asking the people who are the worst at it to actually now solve the problem. We should be asking, why are there these billionaires? Why is it that, you know what, we're in a very interesting time now where actually the billionaires, the corporations are there. I think it hit the tipping point. The corporations are now richer than the nations of the world. So there was a time where a country was the strongest. So America, be it Britain, France, Germany, their economies were strong enough that they were the power. So nation states were the powerful. Yeah. It's flipped now. Now you've got Amazon, you've got Google, you've got your Zuckerberg, you've got your Bill Gates and all of these people. They're actually more powerful than nations now. Yeah. And what we're doing is we're going to them, or at least capitalism is going to them and saying, can you find solutions for us, please? Yeah. Because the states are failing. When the states fail and then you go to these capitalists, you've lost already. You're basically saying, give us solutions to the problems that you guys are actually making worse.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ironic, isn't it? How can they go to the criminal themselves to solve the problem? You know, you are the root of the problem, so how can you solve it?
And you know what, even if some of them are not doing it intentionally, say for instance there's a billionaire somewhere who goes, you know what, I want to use my money for good. So we're not saying that wealth is a bad thing. We're saying that someone might go, I want to use my money for good. But a lot of these, what it is if you let man decide, if you go to man and you go, oh, you know what, I'm going to use my billions for something good. Man is innately flawed. Yeah. He's going to look at something and go, well, okay, that might make me feel better, but he might have in him that need for wanting to make some degree of benefit. So when Zuckerberg said he was going to give 99% of his shares to his child, what did he do? He actually set up a limited liability company to put his money into, which, okay, now he doesn't have to pay tax on it because he's now saying, I'm going to move this money over here. I'm not going to pay tax on it because it's for my child, or I'm giving it away now. I'm giving my wealth away. But actually what happens is a LLC company can still go out and invest. It can still generate revenue. What happens is those super capitalists, they just become richer.
Richer,
You can't ask for solutions from those people. This is where we need to go back to Islam. So Islam has the solution for wealth distribution. Islam ensures that you don't get these, super capitalists who own so much wealth at a time when there's poverty everywhere. And if people were just to take a little step back and go, wait there, we need to solve our problems, by looking at our creed and looking at it from the point of view of there is a creator and the creator designed the best system for mankind, then we'd solve these problems. Unfortunately, Islam is a bogeyman that people don't want to look into.
Yeah. But I think this is a good moment then to, in your discussions with people, certainly with non-Muslims, to point out the ills of the society, and then to be able to, obviously, if they give you their ear, to be able to explain to them how Islam, in fact, eradicates these problems, and also to speak to, and there's a good point that Rash made earlier, also speak to Muslims, because there are some times where I've been in gatherings with Muslims, and and all people are speaking about is this house, this car. It's all about business, and also to show to them that, look, you aspire to live this type of lifestyle, but in reality, look how this whole system is erroneous, and it's rotten from within. So how can you aspire to be successful in their way of life when in fact we need to aspire for success in our way of life? But okay, inshallah ta'ala, you guys have made some really fantastic points. So to sort of like join the dots, shall I say, because there is a connection between the issue of George Floyd and also the issue to do with the ESL, and it's the fact that it's capitalism, and the problem is ideological, and the people of the world, they will not be able to gain any salvation from this ideology until it's replaced with something which is better. So whether we see the ugly face of nationalism and the ugly face of racism, that's also an aspect of the capitalist ideology. And then whether we see the issue to do with liberalism, whether we see the issue to do with all this stuff that's being fed, force-fed, shall I say, to children right now, all of this is an aspect of the capitalist system, liberalism. Whether it's to do with the greed by powerful people who don't care about anyone else, it's another aspect of this. Whether it's through the death and destruction in the Muslim lands, it's again an aspect of one ideology not wanting another ideology, a rival ideology, to rise and to remove it. And even then, the people involved, if you look at all these people that own the weapons companies, they're all part of the government. So all of the issues, we can join them to one dot, and that is the ideology of capitalism, which is the problem here. So inshallah, that's how I can link these together and see that this is the problem, and this is a problem not just for the Western world, but we see it's a problem in our lands as well. And until it's not dealt with, these issues are going to occur east and west. But inshallah, I'm going to give opportunity to you guys now to maybe give your final thoughts, your linkages, if you got anything to add, and then we can sort of wrap this podcast up. I'll start with JK. Bro, if you want to add anything to this, your thoughts, final thoughts.
To be fair, in agreement with what you guys are saying, that both with the George Floyd and the Derek Chauvin case, as well as like the ESL, the point is that just because Chauvin was found guilty, the fact is that hasn't solved the problem. Is one guy who's been found guilty. He's more of a scapegoat. Yeah, he deserves to found what he got. What he's been given, he deserves it. But he's one man within a huge system that is corrupt at its root, right? And then going back to the ESL, many of us can reflect on what kind of happened there, and many might even be celebrating the fact that it kind of only lasted 2 days. But look, we need to reflect on the fact that this is a reflection of society and the system itself. And just kind of, I think often we can talk about capitalism and its ills, and people will agree. But I think what's really important is that bringing to life how, we're saying Islam is the solution, and this would solve these problems, but how? And I think it's really important that we do read up on the economic system of Islam, the social system of Islam, to understand, okay, how does Islam solve these problems? So, for example, with the ESL, you had this monopolization, the fact that these uber capitalists are making subnormal profits, and because of their greed. This is part of it. And the fact is, every person in the capitalist system has that greed, because that's the thought process that they carry. And the reason monopolies exist in capitalism is that it actually pushes them in that direction. So you have things like IP, intellectual property, you have copyright, you have these things that protect. What does it protect? It protects their profits. They will say it protects the idea, but in Islam, why is it that Islam prohibits copyright? It prohibits intellectual property. The reason is because Islam isn't, the Muslim isn't there to gain. He's not a material being only. There is material value in things. We do things to gain for our family, to provide for our family, but we're not just material beings. We have, religious reasons we do things, spiritual value, we call it. We have humanitarian value. We want to do things for the betterment of society. So because of this reason, we don't want to copyright. So if I come up with some amazing idea, that's fine. I can make money from that, but I don't need to protect it, because actually, if it's going to be the betterment of society, I should share it so people can build on it, evolve on that, and then it actually leads to more benefit to society. So in Islam, there's no such thing as monopoly. In fact, the only area where there could be a monopoly, like your utilities, your gas and electricity, where you can't really divide it, in those cases, the government looks after it, and not to make profit, because in Islam, gas, electricity, utilities, it belongs to the Ummah. So the governments don't make money from it. It belongs to the Ummah. They don't charge the Muslims. They don't charge the people of the state. They give it to them for free. So what I'm trying to say is that that's just an example, but it's very important that when we talk about some of the ills of capitalism and ills of society that we live in today, because we're so dominated by it, it's important that we also think about, okay, how would Islam solve this problem? And Islam does genuinely have an answer for all of these issues. And both the issues we spoke about, we can see how Islam eradicated racism, the only ideology to eradicate racism, and also Islam eradicated this concept of greed and materialism that we find today. So that's kind of what I think would be worth the audience reflecting on.
Jazakallah khair. And maybe some really good suggestions for future topics where we could probably dig deeper. And it's easy saying Islam has the answers, but I don't think that's easy enough. You need to explain how it has the answers. So Jazakallah, some really good suggestions there. Brother Rash, your final thoughts, bro?
Yeah, I think JK's kind of said some of the things I was going to mention, but just a couple of little bits then to add is that I think it's important from the point of view of people are looking for solutions to these problems, and it is a good opportunity because, like you said, that's how the two topics are linked. There are problems that have arisen from capitalism, and they are problems that Islam has solutions for, be it poverty, racism, wealth distribution, the way companies are formed. We talk about LLC type companies, LGBT and liberalism. So Islam has a solution to these. And like Majid is saying, maybe we need to go into each of them in a separate podcast for each one and really highlight how Islam solves these issues. The other point quickly is that you are seeing people, because, those people who are not innately or kind of adopt capitalism as an ideology, they are looking for an alternative. There are people now promoting other forms of socialism because they've got to this point where they've gone, well, wait there, communism didn't work. The earlier versions of socialism didn't work. Then we went to capitalism. That clearly doesn't work. Let's try and come up with some other random solution and let's bash capitalism. And this is why some people don't like it when you bash capitalism, especially non-Muslims, because they go, well, there's nothing better. We know there's flaws in it, but there's nothing better. So even these socialists will come out and say, well, we need another form of socio-capitalism. Or the capitalist will go, oh, we just need a less strict version of capitalism. Or we need capitalism with boundaries and these kind of things. But what they don't appreciate is when you take one of these ideologies, inevitably it leads towards its purest form. And when you get to its purest form, like capitalism, becomes fascist. And that's what we're seeing in the world today. Why are we seeing the rise of right wing under capitalism? Because capitalism actually leads to disunity. I think Maj said it earlier, it leads to the one that is stronger oppressing the weaker. That comes from capitalism. Yeah. So no matter how you try and mold capitalism, it's always going to result in these bad fruits. That's why you need to look at an alternative. And the only alternative is the one that comes from our creator. So that's what we need to do. And maybe we need to break those things down. And my very last message is Glazers out. Sorry.
Khairul, yeah, what are you saying, bro?
No, I don't think there's much else to add to that. Some good final messages from JK and Baya. I'll call him Baya. Everyone knows him as Rash, but to us he's Baya. No, I think the main thing is just to highlight that these both incidents in the George Floyd incident with Derek Chauvin's sentence, and then obviously the ESL now not going ahead, people might see it as, oh yeah, they've been solved. You know, these issues have been solved. But what we have to always remember is that capitalism, and as an ideology, has its own defense mechanisms, and it will ensure that it remains strong, and will do everything it can to make sure it is not it's not removed. It will make sure it stays in place. So we shouldn't see it as that this is these problems have been solved now. Actually, we need to look at the alternatives, as the other brothers have mentioned already. So yeah, I don't really want to go into it too much. I think that's...
Sorry to come back on that. I actually slightly disagree. I don't think capitalism is that strong. I think we look at it that way because we've lived it, in terms of our lifetime, and it hasn't been around for that long. Look at some of the other, Islam and how long that was around for, and other kind of isms. Yeah. So I think the reason we think capitalism is strong is just because of the likes of America and these superpowers. Imagine if there was a unified ummah, all of the land, all of the borders were dropped, all of our armies were united, everything was united together, and we implemented Islam. And people from these countries looked over there and said, wait there, they haven't got these billionaires. They haven't got all of these people who own all of the wealth. Actually, their people own the wealth. It's shared. And they looked across to the Muslim lands and said, oh, look at how they treat black and white. Oh, look at how their family structures, how beautiful their family structures are. Look at how they don't have depression in their societies. Oh, look at how, there's so much of Islam that if you saw it in action, I think capitalism would collapse in no time at all, because their populations who are being consumed by this would look across the pond and go, wait there a minute, we want that. And then capitalism would crumble.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I wasn't saying that it was strong. I was just saying that it's going to do everything it can to
no doubt,
as a defense mechanism. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, we need to recognize that. That's why some of the stuff that we're putting out on Votu is around that topic. And inshallah, there's some good posters coming out soon as well. So that's just there for the viewers to look forward to, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, guys. I would just, if I'm going to weigh into what Bay and Khair were just saying, is that you're right, capitalism isn't strong, but getting to that reality, what you're talking about, Rash, where you can show the Islamic world as being that example, that's not easy. In principle, it is easy, but in reality, we see that there are many obstacles in the way, and I think maybe that's what Khairul was trying to say, that
agree.
They have put these checks and balances in place so that another alternative doesn't come around. That doesn't. Yeah, you're right. So their way of life is weak, but if they can stop the proper way of life coming about, then that prolongs their existence. I mean, you guys have made all the points, to be honest with you. The only thing I will add is at one point that Rash mentioned to me in the week leading to the podcast, which he's probably forgotten about. I'm not going to give him the mic to go on about it because we're never going to end this podcast. But I would say is that he mentioned to me that look at the difference between the reaction of the fans against this ESL thing and the reaction towards normal fans against racism in football. Now, if there is the same response from people as there has been ESL for racism, then, probably something might have changed, even going along that way. But you can just see how people allow racism in football. They allow it. You know, why is it, if it was that detested, then why is it that the fans haven't reacted in all these years of bananas being thrown on the pitch and all this stuff happening, right? These tweets about, you know, color and monkey chants and stuff like that. You try and tell me that the fans have acted in this way. If anything, only the players have come together to some extent where they've said we'll walk off the pitch. But the fans in the stadium, they've never reacted. But when it came down to the thing they loved, which was their football teams and their excitement of competition, they came out and they totally rejected it. So that's just a thought for people to think about in their own time. But inshallah, brothers, jazakallah khair for really coming on this podcast in the month of Ramadan, and, you know, with your thirst and with your hunger, sparing the time. For the people listening and watching, please subscribe to all our social media channels, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, certainly. With all these podcasts, I know they can be, if you've reached this point, if you've reached this point of the podcast, then respect to you for a start. But also there are people who don't really sit down and watch an hour plus podcast. So what we have been doing is we're breaking down the best parts in smaller snippets. So please go and check them out on YouTube and share them with your family and friends. And they'll have a key message within them, but obviously they also might encourage people to watch the rest of the podcast. So on that note, brothers, first of all, I want to say assalamu alaikum to you guys, and also assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all our listeners and viewers.
Thanks for watching that video. For more exclusive videos, please like, share and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget, you can listen to some of our shows wherever you are, because we're also available on all popular podcast platforms. And for more Voice of the Ummah content, make sure you check out the links to all of our social media platforms in the description below.